Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 10th edition of Primetime Pards, where we feature former Lafayette students who have gone on to excel in their chosen fields. Our guest tonight is a graduate of the class of 1949, Tom Villante. I'm Gary Laubach, and very happy to have you with us this evening. For optimal viewing of tonight's show, changing the speaker view right now is strongly recommended. To ensure the best possible experience for everyone, the microphones of all attendees will be muted. And during the audience Q&A portion of the show, please utilize the Q&A feature, which can be found by opening participants. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Tom Villante, an electrical engineering major. Tom came to Lafayette in 1945. For the better part of the 20th century, Tom was a staple within America's pastime, the game of baseball. Some of the stars that he called friends were Joe Dimaggio, Yogi Berra, Jackie Robinson. And as you will experience tonight, Tom has an incredible wealth of baseball stories that start in the locker room and for some reason end up in a fancy hotel room with Jimmy Stewart. During his time on College Hill, Tom wrote about sports for the Lafayette student newspaper, which had just restarted publication after pausing for the war. After leaving College Hill, Tom landed a job in BBDO's public relations department. By the time he'd left Lafayette, he'd begun doing sports publicity work. He produced games in Brooklyn for the Dodgers from 1952 to 1957. When the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles in '58, he moved out to the West Coast with the team. He's the only one who worked with both longtime Dodger commentator Vin Scully, who retired in 2016, and the legendary play-by-play man Walter Red Barber, who called Dodgers games from 1939 to 1953. With the greatest of pleasures, I introduce to you Tom Villante. And Tom, welcome aboard tonight to Primetime Pards. It's great to have you with us. It's great to see you looking so young.
Thank you very much. For the Lafayette alumni who went to school with me, they probably knew me as Commie Villante, C-O-M-M-I-E. My name is Carmelo, and all during my school early days, nickname was Commie, C-O-M-M-I-E. And when I joined BBDO in the PR department, the director said, "We can't call you Commie because of the communist." We changed it to Tommy, and it's been Tom ever since.
I know that you grew up in Jackson Heights, right? Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, we had great. We played all kinds of sports, and we had some great guys, had terrific names like Squeak Tito, Fuzzy Barone, Harry the Hawk. It was great. We had a wonderful time.
I know you also grew up in the same neighborhood with Don Rickles, right? He was one of your buddies.
Don Rickles used to hang out at the old White Castle with us. I always remember he had always had white buckskin shoes on, and he was a very pleasant guy, very pleasant.
Did you ever have a clue that he would go on to do the kind of comedy that he ended up doing and doing better than anyone else?
Well, he was always witty, he was always sarcastic, but I never figured he would go into the business and be as successful as he was.
You know, I often tell people that a lot of times life is because you're in the right place at the right time.
Right.
And I don't think anybody exemplifies that story more than you do in the way in which you became associated with the New York Yankees, totally kind of out of accident, and that your best buddy couldn't make the game. So go ahead and tell us that story.
Well, when it happened, I went to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan, and there was a friend of mine called Chester Palmieri, who was the New York Yankee ball boy. So at the beginning of the World Series in 1943 with the Cardinals at the stadium, I went to school and I saw Chester Palmieri in the hallway. I said, "Chester, why aren't you at the game?" He said, "I have reasons to take." I said, "Can I go in your place?" He said, "Sure." So I had been there a few times with them, helping out. So I got to the employee entrance, went right through, no one stopped me. I got to the clubhouse, Yankee clubhouse, and Fred Pop Logan, who was with the Yankee clubhouse since the Highlander days. So I told him that Chester would not be there. So he sent me into the visiting clubhouse, the Cardinal clubhouse. I put me in the Cardinal uniform. I knew something was wrong. If I was going to be the Yankee ball boy, I should have a Yankee uniform. So I hid in the bathroom so no one would see me. So I worked the 1943 World Series as the Cardinal bat boy. So a couple of days after the series ended, I decided I'd go to the stadium to see if I get some kind of a job. So I went into the stadium, Fred Logan, the clubhouse guy. So I chatted with him for a while. He said, just a minute. Within the Yankee clubhouse, I came out with this man who smoked a little cigar, and he looked very familiar to me. It was Joe McCarthy, manager of the Yankees. He asked me questions about school, and he said to me, how would you like to be the home team bat boy next year? I said, I'd love it. He said, write a letter to Pop Logan, which I did. And on St. Patrick's Day, 1945, I got this letter telling me I'd be the Yankee bat boy and to show off the polo ground for a charity game. So I get to the polo ground. They told me to bring my spikes and gloves. So I get to the clubhouse, the visiting clubhouse, carrying my spike with yellow shoelaces. Well, when those ball players saw those yellow shoelaces, they called me. But one of the great thrills of my life was going to my locker, looking up and see my name spelled correctly right next to Frankie Corsetti, was one of my heroes. So that was great. So after a while, he asked me to throw with him. So I threw with him. And he says, what position do you apply? I said, shortstop. Well, okay, so it's a ball. Well, the shortstop position in Major League Baseball is like an outfield position, a sailor. So he moved me over to second base, and it was pretty good. So he had George Sternweiss and Corsetti schooled me, and I ended up taking second infield. So after a while, Lou Boudreau, who was a 26-year-old shortstop and manager of the Cleveland Indians, called me over one day and said in the dugout. And he said to me, are you ready for college? I said, I will be soon. He said, I'll get you a 4-year scholarship at my school, University of Illinois. I said, well, that's wonderful. The next day, Joe McCarthy called me into his office. And he said, I hear you've been talking to Lou Boudreau. He said, what did he offer you? So I told him, he said, you pick out your college and we'll send you. Wow. So it turned out I had relatives, and Charlie Gelbert had just been hired as the new manager at Lafayette, and he was a great shortstop for the St. Louis Cardinals, and that's how I began my career.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So Lou Boudreau, I think he wanted you to go to Northwestern University, right?
Yeah, well, University of Illinois.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, you're right. And anyway, it was fun. So I remember 1946, I was in the Yankee clubhouse. I'd worked out with the Yankees, and I'm talking to Joe Dimaggio, and there's this noise.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to stop you. So
Okay.
I want people to really kind of soak this in. You've already mentioned the Cardinals with Stan Musial. So you spent time with Stan Musial.
Right.
And now you're telling us about talking to another baseball great. This had to be an unbelievable experience for you as a young man.
It really was. So while I was talking to Dimaggio, I heard these guys laughing around this locker. I said, Joe, what's going on? He said, well, there's this kid we just brought up in September. His name is Yogi Berra, and he has a funny way of talking. They're asking him to talk about movies, and he's very, very funny. I remember that 40 years later, I started a show with Yogi called Yogi at the Movies, and he was terrific.
Can we go back? Can we go back a little bit to the Lafayette years? I know we're going to talk about Yogi at the Movies a little bit later on. Can you talk about your Lafayette experience? Because obviously you weren't going to be involved in sports with your major as an electrical engineer. So talk a little bit about that experience, and then we'll get to some of the things that really made you rather famous on campus.
Well, what happened was I ended up playing baseball, second base, for Lafayette, and I played varsity basketball the first 2 years. Basketball was really, I loved basketball. And so I had a lot of fun, and that's when all those years, terrific years in Lafayette, and I had a lot of fun. And I created this fictional character called Yahtzee Sewell, which is really Stay Loose, spelled backwards. And I turned him into a campus celebrity. We had a lot of fun.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the stories that you wrote under the pseudonym of Yahtzee Sewell?
No, I had to do all kinds of things and all kinds of heroic things. And I ended up dressing one of the Lafayette skinny tall kid. He was Yahtzee Sue with the mask. We actually had to play an intramural game. The crowds were just, I mean, he was so popular on campus. It was a lot of fun.
Did everybody know it was you?
Oh, yeah, oh, sure, they did.
Yeah.
Anyway, the story, I wrote the stories for the Lafayette paper. And I used those articles, ended up getting me a job at BBD, in the publicity department. So it turned out great.
I love the story about where your TV broke, and with your electrical engineering background, the guy wanted to charge you an astronomical amount of money to fix the TV. How did you handle that?
What had happened was I was home with my mother and something's wrong with the TV set. So she called a TV repair guy. So I'm sitting there watching it. My mom always wanted me to fix that. Well, the guy charged $35 just for the visit. I said, that's ridiculous. So I sat down and I wrote the 10 most common problems with TV sets, just replacing tubes. And I called it TV Cure. I made so much money from it. I ended up buying a boat called TV Cure. It was fun.
How did you get that published, or how did you get that out there?
I self-published it.
Oh, of course you did.
And I ended up, I worked a deal with the WRTV TV station where they would run ads and we would split the money. So it worked out great.
Oh my goodness, unbelievable. You actually had pro baseball aspirations, right?
Oh, yes, oh, yes. And what had happened was the first spring training I went to, there was this kid who was Casey Stanker loved him, and it was Billy Martin. And Frankie Cressetti told me, "You're going to have a tough time." It was Casey loves this kid. So then I realized I should start looking elsewhere. And that's when I ended up getting a job at BBD.
Do you think without Billy Martin showing up, you might have had an opportunity?
Well, I had a good shot at it.
Uh-huh.
I had a good shot at it. If McCarthy had still being manager, I would have had a very good shot. But when Casey came in, he had Billy in the West Coast, and he loved Billy.
Yeah, I can understand losing your best buddy may have cost you a second base job.
Right.
BBDO. Some people think that Mad Men, the show,
Right.
that very popular show, was based on that advertising agency. Is there any truth to that?
A lot of truth to it. In fact, all the clients that I used in the show were BBDO clients. BBDO stands for Bat, Martin, Thurston, and Osborne. Fred Allen used to kid, it sounds like a trunk falling downstairs. Bat, Martin, Thurston, and Osborne. It's a great advertising agency. What happened
So
was
go ahead.
I spent the first 2 years in the publicity department. Then in 1952, Schaefer Beer and Lucky Strike ended up as the co-sponsors of the Brooklyn Dodgers radio TV, and they wanted a producer. So they looked through their files. So here was this kid who used to be Yankee Fan. So they made me the producer. I knew nothing about television. I became the producer of the Brooklyn Dodgers telecast from 1952 to 57 when they went to LA. And it was terrific.
Can you even believe that happened? I mean,
No.
like you said, you had no experience.
I would sit there and listen. Red Barber was a master. He was a master. And he, radio broadcast, he knew that one of the major complaints listeners had is they didn't get the score long enough. So Red brought a 3-minute head timer so that he would give the score and the situation every 3 minutes. Then when television came along, he knew he wasn't the leader anymore. TV director was. So what he was brilliant. He had a wooden replica made of the ballpark infield, and he had with switches, and then had a replica of the TV director. So Red wanted a shot like the visiting dugout. He turned the switch, and the director knew Red wanted that shot. It was terrific. Now, when Scully first joined the team in 50, I joined in 52, Red would constantly talk to Scully. He said, "Scully, one of the things you don't ever talk over the crowd noise.
Mm-hmm.
Crowd noise is our continuity. Don't ever talk over it. You listen to Scully, and he would say, it's a home run, back off, let the crowd noise die down. Then he would give the detail. Fred was terrific. He was a brilliant guy.
Fred was a master. Interesting story, though, as to why he quit the Dodgers. Tell that story.
Well, what happened was in 1952, he and his family went to Portugal. And he came back and he bought a beret and he wore this beret and he wouldn't take it off. And he wore it to an on-camera commercial. Well, the two sponsors, Schaefer Beer and Lucky Strike, thought it was very effeminate and they wanted him to take it off. Walter O'Malley wanted him to take it off. So my job was to talk to Red. I said, Red, you got to take off the beret. He wouldn't take it off. All during that season of 53, he would not take the beret off. So he knew that the sponsors were not going to renew him. So towards the end of the season, he reached out to the Yankees and they hired him, he and Mel Allen. So that's why he left the Yankees. Because of that beret.
Unbelievable that he would be willing to give up that job, but he ended up on his feet pretty well.
Yes, he
No
did.
question. You were also a pioneer. I mean, this is something that's so obvious today, but back then unheard of. You started to make sure the broadcasts were in Spanish.
That's right, exactly. There was such a huge Puerto Rican population in New York that we ended up hiring Buck Cannell, the very famous medical. So what we did was we would advertise in the Spanish newspapers, watch in English and listen in Spanish. So they'd watch the WRTV telecast and the Spanish audio. Terrific. It very well got Schaefer into the #1 position.
And now today, everything, I mean, you can even read it in Spanish as the game is being done. So you're way ahead of your time, for sure. Also, tell us a little bit about doing away games, which was also unheard of. And after I heard your explanation, it made so much sense that the away games were going to be done as opposed to just doing the home games.
Walter O'Malley always wanted to do road games, not home games. And it made sense. The problem was it was so expensive. So AT&T controlled all the lines. So I sat with them. Of course, some of my electrical background, as you know, came in. They talked about the class of cable, and they said, well, when you do from here to here to here, so what happens? We leave, and the Giants come in. Same thing. I said, why? He said, it's the usage. You got to have a common usage. So I ended up starting a company called Sports Network, who became the buyer of AT&T. So there was one buyer. So all our rates came down tremendously. So everyone was able to afford doing road games.
Tom, I'm going to ask you just, if your phone is near your computer, I'm going to ask you to move it just a little bit because we're getting a little bit of static and we certainly want to hear every word that you say. I'm going to, let's do a little stream of consciousness. I'll give you a name. You talk all about that person. Everybody knows Joe Dimaggio. What was he really like?
Joe Dimaggio, I've been to a lot of clubhouses, but in the Yankee clubhouse, Joe was no question. He was a star, all by himself. He'd hold up his hand and well, next thing you know, the clubhouse guy had a cup of coffee in there. Billy Martin wanted to lock him next to Joe D because he was like Joe D's Bobo. And he claimed he told me Joe gave him the 56 game hit bat. So I asked Joe, I said, I gave it to Lou Costello from Matt Abbott and Costello. I really believe he had this bat. Joe was a terrific guy. He was, he really was a star. He had a certain charisma about him that was just terrific. Great athlete. I never saw him die for a ball. He was always there.
There were nobody better than Joe Dimaggio. And then
I have one Joe D story. Is he ended up playing golf as my guest up in Westchester Country Club. So afterwards, I brought him to my house in Westchester, and we had lunch. And afterwards, over a drive home, and my little 7-year-old son wanted to join us. So I asked Joe. He said, "That's all right." So Joe's in the passenger seat on the right side, and my son's in the back. You got to remember, Joe at that time was probably the most recognizable face in America.
mm-hmm.
So Joe's kind of napping off. My little son's asking the question, Joe, you have a job? He said, well, I really don't have a job. People pay me to play golf and make appearances. And he said, are you married? Well, I was. Her name was Marilyn. I said, that's my mom's name. And he started asking questions about Marilyn. When we finally got to the hotel in New York, we got in the car. Joe tousled my little son's hand. He looked at me and he said, you got a gutsy kid here. So
not
when
far from the tree.
when we're driving back, my son said, I don't want to ride with him anymore. Uncle Joe, he's very boring.
Well, one guy I would assume was not very boring was Jackie Robinson.
Jackie was terrific. Jackie, in those days, the black ball players were not allowed in the same hotel, especially in St. Louis. And after a while, they agreed to live in the hotel, but they couldn't eat in the dining room. So Jackie used to eat in his room, and I go up there with him a lot. And we used to putting contest into a turned over glass. He was terrific. Jackie had such a sense about it. I'll tell you what he did was he ended up becoming a Nelson Rockefeller Republican. And I asked his wife, Rachel, I said, how come Jackie did that? I mean, he said he didn't want the Democrats to take the blacks for habit. And he wanted them to compete. So he built up this constituency to Republicans. Black. He was terrific guy.
And he was a friend for life, right?
Yeah, I used to play golf. A lot of the games at Ebbets Field began at 3:00. It would be done by 4 or 5. It was a golf course on the way, and Jackie started to play. Well, he never played before, so it was very awkward. Jackie was awkward, I think. So he ended up barely making 100, and he ended up breaking 100, breaking 90. He was shooting in the 70s. That's how terrific I had this great eye-hand coordination.
As natural an athlete as there was. And
Was that
how about, I know you played golf up until a couple years ago. Are you still hitting the ball?
Right, yeah. Yogi, I brought Yogi up here to play. So on the practice green, and Yogi is like 20 yards away from the putting hole. I said, Yogi, why don't you get close? He says, why? I said, I'm never that close. So
Yeah.
when we were watching Nick Faldo play a practice round on our 18th hole, I said, Yogi, let's watch him. So Faldo puts the ball down and he starts to put. I said, Yogi, you can bet your life this ball is going to break right to left. Yogi looked at me and said, why are you telling me that? I putt left-handed.
Do you think he just had a crazy mind and knew all the things that he said that became so famous that he knew they were juxtapositioned or?
Yogi didn't tell jokes. He just, in response to things, for example, when we did the pilot for Yogi at the movies, it was Fatal Attraction. And he kept calling Glenn Close, Glenn Cove. I was off camera. He was sitting on a stool. And I asked him, Yogi, did you get scared? No, I didn't get scared. He said, I only got scared at the scary part. He said, the last 15 minutes was so scary. He said, I couldn't watch it. He kept calling Glenn Close, Glenn Cove. He was terrific.
Well, you turned movie reviews by Yogi Berra into what you alluded to earlier, Yogi at the Movies.
Yeah.
How popular was that? Was that a
Well,
weekly thing or a?
Yeah, but what it was, Stroh's Beer used it as part of their. They would buy a minute spot. 30 seconds of it was the Yogi show. The other 30 seconds was a commercial. So they ran that campaign all over America during 1980, 88, and 89. It's very popular.
One of
When I first talked to Yogi about it, and I went to his house and his wife Mama was there, I said, Yogi, do you still love movies? He said, I love movies if I like them. So he was hesitant about doing it. Colin Barrett said, of course you're going to do it. He said, I need a new kitchen. So Yogi was great. So we did the show, and he was remarkable. We never talked about it bad. We just said, we're going to watch so-and-so movie, and I'd ask him questions, and he was hysterical. Every show had a Yogiism.
He was the final Jeopardy answer on Jeopardy last night. Yogi Berra was. I don't know whether you saw it or not. They asked who said that record will stand until it's broken. That was his quote. You know, one of your buddies that I think was a sponsor of Yogi at the Movies, Jim Finnan, I think is with us tonight. So he's watching you, and I'm sure enjoying your stories.
That's great. That's great.
All right. How about Tommy Lasordo? What was Tommy Lasordo?
Lasordo was good. Lasordo came up in '55 with Dodgers, and so we became friends immediately. And he did some terrific things. I mean, for example, he was very friendly with Ronald Reagan. So when Ronald Reagan was so ill and he's on the West Coast, they had a huge honorary dinner for him in Washington, D.C., loaded with dignitaries. The two speeches was Margaret Thatcher and Tommy Lasordo. So Margaret Thatcher spoke to Tommy, said she would try. She got a 5-minute standing ovation. Now it's his turn. So Lasordo gets up and says, I knew I'd have to give the speech of my life. I worked on it for months. In fact, he said, I worked on it till 3 o'clock this morning. Finally got it just right. Came into the lobby. I lost my speech. I fell on the floor, and Margaret Thatcher found it.
And I guess his wife got upset at one point because she thought he loved baseball more than he loved her.
Yeah.
He had a
yeah.
great response.
Yeah, what had happened when he came late, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and she says, Tommy, you always come in late. You always doing something with baseball. I said, I think you love baseball more than me. Tommy, yeah, but I love you more than football or basketball or soccer.
So what made you leave that to go to the commissioner's office? What was the impetus that caused you to make that move?
Well, the commissioner's office was something that was just, the head of TV and marketing, and it was a prestige job. I got to do baseball fever there, so it became a very institutional thing. I had a lot of fun doing it. Then when I left there after 5 years, I went on my own and formed my own company.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we should skip over what you just said because most people probably don't realize, but the Major League Baseball slogan, baseball fever, catch it, that's your slogan, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
You created that.
Yeah, I created the spots too. It was a lot of fun. It caught on. It really caught on.
And the goal, your marketing goal, obviously was to increase attendance. And if I read correctly, attendance went from 1.2 to 1.7 million people
Right.
when you came out with that slogan.
And in advertising, the number one thing you do for a product is you find out who the best prospect is. The one person, people who consume the majority of the product. So I knew in baseball, I knew exactly who the best prospect was. It was the guy sitting at home watching television and listening to radio. That's why the whole campaign was designed to get them off that couch and come out to the ballpark. That's why with baseball fever, catch it. All the spots we ran were actual footage shots, and it became very popular.
Obviously, and it still hangs around today after
Right.
all these years. You also, I believe, helped create the Major League Baseball logo, right?
That's right. I believe it or not, the American League had a logo and the National League had a logo. There was no Major League logo. So I decided when I joined the commissioner's office, the first thing we needed. So I got a hold of this firm. I knew they were good designers. And they came up with the logo, the Major League that you see today.
Yeah, I think, and you said that everybody thought it was based on Harmon Killebrew, and not true.
Excuse me?
Everybody thought it was based on Harmon Killebrew, and that was not true.
Killebrew claimed it was, but it was not true. Not true.
True.
He claimed it, but it's not true.
I think the greatest part of the logo is the fact that it looks like it could be a right-handed or a left-handed batter.
Absolutely. That's one of the charms of it. Could be a right-handed or left-handed batter.
And you found that artist, right?
Oh, yeah. It was terrific. His name was Jerry Dior, D-I-O-R.
Oh, my goodness. So now you have this persona. I don't know whether it's called, whether you write a blog. What do you call it? Is it a blog? Is it a...
Well, the story I do is, yeah, I got articles. I had my best friend in advertising was a guy called Alphonse. He was a TV artist, and he was also a very famous cartoonist. He had cartoons running in Esquire and Playboy, and he was very, very fun. I remember he had a neighbor who was a terrific fan, and so the Daily News had a series. They would present a subject and invite people to write in pro and con. Well, the subject this week was pigeons in New York, love them or hate them. Well, a pigeon hater from the Bronx, pigeon lover from the Bronx, wrote this terrific thing. He was invited on the show, and Alphonse's neighbor was a pigeon lover. He was invited on the show. It's going to be a live debate on a Sunday afternoon. That
What
Sunday
pigeon?
morning, that Sunday morning, Alphonse's neighbor got nervous and asked Alphonse to go to his place. So Alphonse went to his place. And he said the first 5 minutes, pigeon hater from the Bronx, pigeon lover, pigeon hater from the Bronx. Went on and he took a lousy bird and carried disease and stuff. Now, pigeon lover from Queens, Alphonse gets up towards the board and says, I agree with the previous speaker.
Not much of a debate. So why have you kept him as part of your writings?
Because he was such a funny guy. He did a lot of funny things. And we went to lunch 2 or 3 times a week for 60 years. And we had a lot of experiences. So he got Parkinson's disease, and I was in the hospital. I visited him, and mentally he was okay, but he had a tough time talking. So one day I was talking to him when I get ready to leave, and I get to the door and I started to go back, and I hugged him. First time I ever hugged him, and a week later he died. And I said to my wife, I want to do stories. People who knew Alphonse loved him. I want to do some stories on Alphonse to keep his name and his memory alive. So I started in 2010 with me and Alphonse. We've been doing 2 or 3 a week, and his cartoons are great. So he had some very funny stories.
That's an amazing number of writings that you do. So that explains your friendship with Alphonse. I know there's a couple other people outside of baseball that you've had some really good relationships with. Talk about your relationship with Rocky Graziano, the boxer.
Rocky lived in the same neighborhood I did, and I'd see him all the time. We'd go to the bakery, and we got talking. I remember when Rocky Marciano was killed in a plane crash, I happened to bump into Rocky Graziano. I said, too bad about Rocky Marciano. I said, he was always freeloading. Served him right by hitching a ride on that plane. Yeah. The one funny Alphonse story was we'd go shopping and he'd look for a receipt and he had this wallet and all kinds of things falling out. So one day it fell out and I saw this little cut from a newspaper with all numbers on it. It was terms of his divorce. So I said to Alphonse, you got to get a safe deposit box. So we went and they finally, I said, Alphonse, you have the safe deposit. I got a better idea. I have a waste paper basket under my desk at home. I put all my valuables in it. No one's going to think of it. Little did he realize that his daughter went to clean the apartment, took the waste paper basket, and threw everything down the incinerator. Oh my God. His Visa cards, his passport. It was his worst nightmare.
Oh my gosh. Oh. It's funny, but it's not funny.
One other story about Alpha. My brother and I had a restaurant on East 58th Street called Mama Laura. So one day, Alphonse and I were eating there, and Jackie Kennedy came in with this older fella. So he sits down, and on the way out, I said to Alphonse, don't do anything. Don't cause any problems. My brother was very upset. He walked by the table. Watch Alphonse. He looks at Jackie Kennedy, and he nods his head. She looks back at him, and she nods back.
Your life experiences are amazing. You know, there are a couple of people I don't know who they are. The Kawano brothers. Who are they?
Clubhouse man. Nobody
Okay.
Kawano was a Dodger clubhouse man fan. But Yosh Kawano was with the Chicago Cubs for years and years. When the Wrigley family sold the club to the Tribune Company, there was a clause in the contract they could not fire Yosh. He had a sailor hat he put on backwards. That ended up in the Hall of Fame. They were a very funny guy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they were great company, great company.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, you alluded to, or I alluded to, the being in a hotel room with Jimmy Stewart. I don't know this story at all, so you're going to have to fill us all in.
We had a 100th anniversary dinner, centennial dinner in Washington, D.C. And what I wanted to do was, we wanted to do a record album. and it was terrific. But in my head, I heard Jimmy Stewart as the narrator. So I picked up the phone and I called him. And I got him on the phone, so I talked about it. He accepted immediately. I'm not even sure how much we paid him. But during the ceremony, we invited the Hall of Fame players. They used the audio from Jimmy Stewart, which was terrific. It was a very, very moving moments.
Oh my goodness, that is a great story. I don't know. It seems like anybody that met you liked you.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
I
I'm sure
remember
you did.
when Lasordo was in town, he'd always go to the Carnegie Delicatessen. And we'd sit there. Next thing you know is all the comers would come in. I had a young man and they'd come in, and next thing you know, the table was jammed. So on the way out, I said to Lasordo, Tom, I said, who picked up the tab? He stopped and I said, look, the two things we never talk about, and is religion and who picks up the tab.
As long as you didn't have to, and I guess he didn't have to, it was fine. I do want to remind anybody now that if you have a question for Tom, it's a good time to get it in here, because I now want to talk to you about, and you know, at your stage in life, I am always amazed at all the things that you continue to accomplish. And now I hear you're actually writing a book.
That's right. I'll tell you the name of the book.
What is the name?
I'm going to give you the name. What happened was,
Okay.
the story is we're flying in the Dodger plane, and the plane crashes, and they're out and identifying the bodies. There's Pee Wee Reese and Gil Hodges and Jackie Roberts, and there's this guy, Unidentified Friend. So that's the name of my book, Unidentified Friend.
What keeps you going, Tom? I mean, you're not a young man. What keeps you going?
First of all, I enjoy doing the columns, the me and Alphonse stories. It's terrific. I've been doing it for 11 years now. So they're a lot of fun. And I get a lot of playback from it. We started out with maybe 50 or 60 on our email list. We're now up to the thousands. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of satisfaction.
So what's a typical day now? I know you're obviously busy writing. You probably are in front of your computer a lot.
We live at the Westchester Country Club. I have one of the rooms is my office, so there's a lot of fun here. Ralph Branker used to live in this building, and so there's a lot of fun. I remember Jim Cotter, the old pitcher, was waiting down in the lobby, waiting for Ralph to go to breakfast. So I bumped into him. He told me he broke paw shooting right-handed and shooting left-handed. Shot fast. Amazing.
Ralph Branca, famous for, or infamous, I guess,
Yeah.
for
I
one
did-
bad pitch.
I did give Ralph a line that he used all the time. The line was, I lost a game, but I won a friend. He and Bobby Thompson became good friends.
Is that right? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Bobby
I
Thompson
lost
with the huge home run.
Yeah, the home run.
Didn't he tell you once though he should have thrown at his head?
You think?
Didn't he tell you should have thrown at him?
No, no, he just hit a good pitch.
I have a question from one of our viewers. Can you tell us about the best game you ever watched in person?
Well, there was games where Dimaggio had some terrific games, and I can't remember any of the games. I remember one game as far as announcing. We were in Boston, and Dodgers were playing, and they were at the tail end of the game. And I looked, and there was a storm. You could see a storm coming. Before Red was sitting, you could see it. So Red began. They wanted to make an official game. Of course, the Dodgers were winning, and the Braves were stalling. So Red was giving his play-by-play. At the same time, he's describing the storm as it's coming in, and any minute it's going to rain and cancel the game. It was very exciting. He did a terrific job.
You saw Don Larson's perfect game also, right?
I was in the stands. I was a spectator. That was something.
I was going to say that had to be. I mean, I listened to that game on the radio, and
That's
still special for me.
That I always talk about is in Dodger Town. Dodgers had four instructors. They had Gil Hodges, Clem LeBlanc, Carl Erskine, and Duke Snyder. They were sitting at his table and they were talking, and finally, they all had ailments, and bad backs, bad legs. At one point, Rob Branca got up and slowly started to shift his feet. Duke Snyder says, "Where you rushing to?"
I have another question from one of our viewers. Where was the baseball field when you played at Lafayette?
Excuse me?
Where
That
was the base? Go
uh,
ahead.
I can't think of the name of the field.
Fisher Field? Was it where Fisher Stadium is now?
Yeah, that was it.
And do you have any Lafayette stories about your baseball career?
Charlie Gelber was a terrific coach. He was very, very good. Tony Cartini was the shortstop, and I was a second baseman. Well, yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of Peck Robbins from Lafayette, terrific football player, a terrific pitcher. He signed with the Yankees, but didn't get very.
It's interesting you played for Charlie Gelber, and years later, when I pitched against Lafayette, Charlie Gelber was still the head coach. So obviously a great career for him.
Yeah.
You know, baseball is getting, I don't want to say a bad rap, but a lot of people saying it's too long, it's hard to watch it. Do you have those similar feelings, or can you still sit in front of a game, in front of a TV and watch it?
Very bothersome to me of the new stats they're coming up with. I mean, POS. What happened to the old runs, hits, and errors? And they're making it very, very confusing. And they don't have that. There's no reason to do it. Just
Right.
keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Do you still enjoy it? Do you still enjoy watching a game?
Very much so. Very much
Yeah.
so. You know, every time there's a ball game, you never know what's going to happen. You
Mhm.
never know what's going to happen.
So this is a good time of the year for you watching the playoffs?
Oh yeah, very excited.
And the Giants Dodgers tonight should be a special game.
Yeah. I always had a lot of fun with the Dodgers. They were a terrific organization. The O'Malley's, Walter and Peter O'Malley, which is great.
Do you think the game's too long? Or is there anything you would do besides some of these stats that nobody understands?
The game is the game. You know, if it's a good game, it could be 4 hours long. You're going to be interested. The problem is when they drag out the game, when the pitchers take forever to pitch and the batters get in and out of the box, that drives me nuts. The umpire should move them along. Don't take so long.
And fixing the glove after every pitch. So are you a lifetime Yankee fan or a lifetime Dodgers fan or just a baseball fan?
I'm both Dodgers and Yankees.
Yeah.
To both clubs. I enjoyed Lasordo. He was a terrific manager. He did a lot of funny things. I remember, there was a Yankee Dodger World Series, and Lasordo was a fan there. We're in Brooklyn and New York, and the Yankees won the first two games. They now go back to California. And the night before, there's a dinner. So after the dinner, Marilyn get ready to leave my wife, and Lasordo says, "Where you going?" She said, "I'll drive it." As I'm walking through Dodger Stadium, I walked down to the mezzanine box. I said, "Tommy, I want you to imagine tomorrow that you're managing. What happens is that fat number 2 walks out to the dugout. Valenzuela is pitching a terrific game. The question is, he gets into a little trouble. Are you going to take him out or not?" And this loudmouth section in the mezzanine goes, "Leave him in there, you fathead. He got you this far." Well, as it turned out, in the actual game, that situation took place with Valenzuela. Lasordo left dugout, went to the mound, and kept him in the game. And he ended up doing great. Afterwards, the news guys and the media were asking Lasordo, "What possessed you to keep him in the game?" And Lasordo saw me coming. He said, "I'll tell you what was it. I didn't want to hear that odd mouth in the mezzanine section."
So he got some help managing that night. We have a question. You know, there's a number of student athletes who are watching this tonight. And obviously, learning about all of these great stories. Do you have any advice for young people who are attending a college right now? And as you see how your life went and panned out, any advice for any of them?
All I know is if you're going to be a ball player, no matter what you're going to do, you really have to work at it. No kidding, you have to work at it. And do the best you can. You never know when you can help a club. You never know.
That's true in any walk of life, right?
That's right.
As you reflect back, I think maybe as you were getting ready to go to Lafayette, the last thing you probably thought you would ever be is a publicity guy with an ad agency.
Well, not really, Sue. What happened was I always liked to write. And while I was at Lafayette, I did a lot of writing. I was an assistant publicity. I kind of enjoyed it. And when I got out of college, uh, I knew I wasn't going to go become an electrical engineer. I knew that for sure.
Mhm.
So I figured I'd try it. And as it turned out, I ended up with some pretty good breaks.
Is there something special about your Lafayette experiences? I mean, did you run into some great professors or?
Now, I tell you great. What I did like about Lafayette and what drew me to it was it was terrific in science and engineering. When I
Mhm.
took an engineering course, I knew I'd have to work at it. And so I really had to apply myself. And that worked very well. It helped me all through my life because you have to apply yourself.
I know you get a lot of Lafayette guys who visit you from time to time.
Yeah.
John Leone tells me story after story
Yeah.
of people that stop by to see you.
Charlie Berry, believe it or not, was a major league umpire and an umpire in the NFL. So when he heard I was going to go to Lafayette, he was very, very strong on Lafayette. He lived in one of the border towns, and he was a big Lafayette guy, terrific athlete.
How about, another name that just popped into my head, Sandy Koufax. That's somebody that you probably also had some experiences with.
Yeah, Sandy's a good friend of mine. He lives near me in Vero Beach, Florida. So we go to dinner a lot. But at one point, I told my wife, look, after dinner, I want you to take a picture of me and Sandy. Be sure to get our hands because Sandy has huge hands.
Yeah.
We had this picture. My wife could, but Sandy took it. See, my hand next to Sandy's hand, he has huge hands. Sandy's a terrific guy. When he first came up, he was a terrible. I mean, he threw the ball. It was high, wide, but he threw hard. And what happened was when the Dodgers moved to LA, Norm Sherry, I've known one of the shows. Norm Sherry was a catcher, and he went to Sandy, and he said, Sandy, when you go into a wind-up position with men on first, your control is terrific, and your ball takes off. From that moment on, Sandy gave up the wind-up, went to the stretch position, and he had 5 or 6 years that he might have been the greatest pitcher that ever lived. He was just phenomenal.
One thing that's amazed me about him, he happened to be a member of a club up our way, up here, and he would go and hit buckets of balls constantly. In fact, the rumor was he never played the course. He only practiced. I was amazed by his size. He's not a big man at all.
Sandy?
Yes.
He's 6'1". He's not too.
Oh, is he really? It didn't appear that he was that big.
Yeah.
Did you play some golf with him?
His first wife was the daughter of, I can't think of his name. Anyway, Sandy is married 3 times. So recently we went to dinner with him. I said, Sandy, I've never seen you so happy. And he pointed to his new wife. Her name is Jane Clark. She's great for him, terrific.
Oh, that's good for him. Yeah.
Sandy's lived in the same place in Vero for years now. I mean, he walks around town. People pay attention to him, but no one, bothers him.
Tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I have, of course, my wife. I have 2, a son and a daughter, and 5 grandkids. My son was a good ball player at Princeton.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you get there to see those games?
He's in California. My daughter,
Okay.
so I see him when he comes into town.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. How's your health?
My health is great. My health is terrific. My wife's had a problem. She has Parkinson's, so the last couple of years she's had a tough time of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we certainly we wish her the best. We certainly. When do you think the book will be done?
Pretty soon. I have a lot of it done.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah, I've
And
used a lot of my stories, for me and Alphonse stories, a lot of stories, unidentified friend. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of Jackie Robinson, a lot of Gil Hodges. They were all Duke Snyder, terrific guys.
how would you describe the genre? What genre is it?
Hmm?
What genre is it? Is it a comic or
No, it's a story about baseball and baseball players, mostly
okay.
about players and what they were like. But they were some of them were terrific guys, just great guys.
I would be anxious to read it.
Thank you.
Tom, we're out of time. Just fabulous talking to you. The stories are great. And I look forward to getting to the bookstore and buying your book.
Thank you very much.
And
Tell
I'll
your
tell
friends.
everybody, I know that guy.
Tell your friends.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Bye now.
That is the 10th edition of Primetime Pards. I will remind you that the 11th edition is coming up on December 9th. We will be talking to Leslie Ann Howard, class of 76. She is part of the first female class ever to attend Lafayette College. So that should be a very interesting conversation. She has had an amazing, amazing career in public service. So we will chat with Leslie Ann Howard on December 9th. My utmost thanks to Tom for taking time to be with us tonight. I always thank all of you for spending time with us. So for all of us on Primetime Pards, I'm Gary Laubach. Good night, everybody.